Hello, everyone, and welcome to Geopolitical Trends, where truth matters. Every era has a moment when historians later say that is when everything changed. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in 1914, the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989, the morning of September 11th, 2001. February 28, 2026 may belong on that list, and we are still living inside the first chapter only. Imagine waking up one morning to find out that the leader of one of the world's most influential governments had been killed overnight, not by accident, not by revolution inside his own or her own country, but by a carefully planned military strike launched by the United States and Israel. That is exactly what happened on February 28, 2026, when a military operation known to Israelis as Operation Roaring Lion and to the Americans as Operation Epic Fury changed everything. In the first moments of that attack, Israeli missiles strike a location where Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, was meeting with his top advisors. Within the hour, Israeli officials announced that Khamenei, the man who had ruled Iran for more than 3 decades, was dead, along with roughly 40 of his most powerful allies. The world has not seen anything like it in generations. In the next 15 minutes, I will walk you through what happened, why it happened, and what it means, not just for the Middle East or West Asia, but for the entire world. I will look at the role of the United States, the reaction of major powers like Russia and China, the chaos unfolding inside Iran, and the difficult question being raised about war, power, and the rules that are supposed to hold the world together. So, what happened? For years, tensions between the United States, Israel, and Iran had been building like pressure inside a volcano. Washington and Tel Aviv argue that Iran had long supported armed groups across the Middle East that regularly attacked Israel. They also argue that it also had been developing its nuclear program, widely believed to be aimed at eventually building a nuclear weapon. And it had provided weapons and drones to Russia during its war in Ukraine. Then, on the 9th of February 28, 2026, the volcano erupted. Israel launched what it called Operation Roaring Lion, and the United States joined in the operation that is called Operation Epic Fury. Together, they struck dozens of targets across Iran, military bases, missile factories, command centers, and most shockingly, the location where Iran's top leadership was meeting. The United States military buildup ahead of the attack was described as the largest American military presence in the Middle East since 2003, the invasion of Iraq. The USS Gerald Ford aircraft carrier was stationed in the eastern Mediterranean and actively launching planes. American bombers and Israeli jets worked together in a way that had been planned and prepared for months. The intelligence operation behind the strike was staggering, if I may add. The CIA had apparently spent months gathering information about where Khamenei and his inner circle will be. That information was shared with Israel, and the opening missiles of the operation found their target with devastating precision. Within the first hour, Israeli officials told the world what they believed. The supreme leader of Iran was dead. According to the U.S. Central Command, 6 American service members were killed during the operation against Iran. In addition to 5 others were seriously wounded. Iran fight back and hits its neighbors too. Within hours of the initial strike, Iran launched waves of missiles and drones aimed at Israel and the U.S. military bases across the region. But what stunned every experienced analyst was where else Iran chose to strike. Alongside attacks on Israel and American facilities, Iran launched missiles and drones at Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, and Oman, even Cyprus, countries that had nothing to do with the attack. And why would Iran attack its Arab neighbors? The answer is that most of those countries host American military bases. Iran was essentially saying, if America uses your territory to wage war on us, you are a target too. It was an act of desperate rage, but it badly backfired. The Gulf states, which had been carefully neutral at some point, were furious. Saudi Arabia, for example, called Iran's strike as a flagrant violation of international law and warned of dire consequences. Even countries that privately resented American power could not defend Iran after it had bombed them. Meanwhile, at home in Iran, somewhere else was happening within Iran. As news of Khamenei's death spread, Iranians poured into the street, not to mourn, but to celebrate. Not all, of course, not all of them. Years of economic suffering, brutal crackdowns sometimes on protesters, and disappointments with the Islamic Republic had built up enormous resentment. In southern Iran, a crowd toppled a monument of Ali Khamenei, the founder of the Islamic Republic. The government responded by cutting off the internet and deploying security forces. Israel also opened a second front during this period. Taking advantage of the chaos, Israeli forces struck targets in Lebanon in response to provocations by Hezbollah, Iran's most powerful and long-standing proxy group, killing more than 50 people. The axis of resistance, the network of armed groups that Iran had spent decades building and arming across the region, was now under attack on multiple fronts at the same time. Then comes Russia and China. Many wonders, big words, no action. Military and geopolitical analysts argue that for years, Russia and China have told the world that American dominance is over. They have argued that a new multipolar world is emerging, a world where multiple powerful countries share influence rather than one where the United States calls the shots. The war against Iran has put that claim to a serious test. And so far, Russia and China have failed it badly. Russia condemned the strikes loudly. President Vladimir Putin called the attack a cynical violence of all norms of human morality and international law. China, on the other hand, called it a grave violation of Iran's sovereignty that tramples on the purposes and principles of the United Nations Charter. Strong words, but words were all they offered. The truth is that neither Russia nor China did anything meaningful, militarily speaking, to protect Iran before or during the attack. Russia, despite receiving Iranian drones for use in its war in Ukraine, never delivered the advanced air defense systems that might have given Iran a fighting chance against Israeli and American missiles. Moscow repeatedly promised things like the S-400 missile systems and modern fighter jets, then backed away. China helped Iran in small way, repeatedly assisting with missile technologies, but never committed to Iran's defense. Why, you may ask? Partly because both countries, Russia and China, are too busy with their own problems. Russia is bogged down in a grinding war in Ukraine that has sort of worn out its military and its economy to a degree. China is deeply connected to Gulf states like Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates, economically speaking, far from important to Beijing than Iran, and could not afford to be seen as a supporting a country that had just bombed these partners. The result is that Moscow and Beijing were, as some analysts put it, reduced to splintering helplessly from the sideline as their regional ally was destroyed. The dream of a multipolar world that could really stand up to American power looks much shakier today than it did a few months ago. And that leads us to the key question. Is American dominance back? The short answer is, in terms of a raw power, a raw military power, it never went away. The United States demonstrated in the opening hours of Operation Roaring Lion something that no other country on earth could do. Coordinate intelligence, carrier groups, long-range bombers, and allied forces across thousands of miles to strike dozens of targets with precision, and all in one single night. That is an extraordinary capability, to say the least. Let's face it, no other nation comes close to that for now. President Trump, who authorized the operation, which we all know he was pressured behind the scenes, made clear he saw this as a message to the world. Since returning to office, he had been pushing hard to project American power, American strength, after what he saw as years of weakness under previous administrations. The killing of Khamenei was, in his framing, proof that America is back and willing to act. But here is where things gets complicated. Military power and lasting dominance are not the same thing. History offers some painful lessons. The United States had overwhelming military power when it invaded Iraq in 2003, when it fought in Afghanistan for 20 years, and when it helped topple Libya's government. In each case, destroying the old regime was relatively quick and easy. Building something stable in its place was another matter entirely. But starting a major war with a nation of 93 million people, with almost 2,500 years of history and a deeply entrenched security apparatus without a clear plan for what comes next, is an enormous gamble, in my opinion. Bombing a country is not the same as transforming it. As argued in my Iran book, Volatile State, Iran in the Nuclear Age, the Islamic Republic of Iran is a complex system, not just one man. Khamenei is gone, but the Revolutionary Guard, the clerical establishment, and the network of true believers remain. A succession plan is already being activated and underway. There is also the question of whether America's own political system can sustain this. Just a few months ago, the Trump administration published a national security strategy that says, in its own word, and I quote, that the days in which the Middle East dominated American foreign policy are thankfully over. End of quote. Now, the United States is in the middle of what could become its biggest Middle Eastern war in 2 decades. The tensions between those two ideas will not go away easily. Then we have the big picture. What does it mean? What this means for the world? The geopolitical ramification, that is, the effect on how countries relate to each other and how power works globally, of this war are enormous. So let me break it down for you. First, the Middle East itself, or West Asia, The war has scrambled every alliance and assumptions in the region. Arab countries that privately feared Iran are now publicly aligned, at least for the moment, against it. The Gulf monarchies that host American bases were sort of forced off the fence when Iranian missiles landed on their soil. Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and others now have an even stronger reason to keep American forces present as a shield, even if they are uncomfortable being seen as a participant in the conflict. Second, the global economy. About 20% of the world oil supply passes through the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow waterway at the entrance of the Persian Gulf. Every single day, Iran closed the Strait of Hormuz, at least for now, and vowed to set fire to any ship passing through, and it did. Insurance companies are beginning to charge dramatically higher rates for ships entering the Gulf. The economic shock waves of this conflict are spreading far beyond the battlefield. Third, international law and the rule-based order, so to speak. This is one of the most uncomfortable conversations happening among diplomats and legal experts as we speak. The United States launched a premeditated attack on a sovereign nation, one that was not at the moment conducting an attack on American soil or troops. No imminent threat was clearly demonstrated in advance. No congressional authorization was sought. The United Nations Secretary General warned that the strikes undermine now, like before, international peace and security. The European Union, which is useless but needless to say, called the conflict greatly concerning and urged all parties to respect international law. The European Council on Foreign Relations went even further, calling it an illegal war of choice. These are serious charges, and they will shape, in my opinion, how the rest of the world views American leadership for years to come. Fourth, and perhaps most importantly, is the long run. What happens inside Iran? The celebration in the streets after Khamenei's death showed genuine popular hatred of the regime, but not all of them. But popular sentiment alone does not determine who ends up in power when a regime falls. There is no obvious opposition movement waiting in the wings with the government ready to go. History suggests that when authoritarian regimes collapses without a prepared successor, the result is often not democracy, as some of us might have wished, but chaos or a new regime. A power struggle ensued. Iraq in 2003, Libya in 2011 are the cautionary tales everyone is thinking about right now. Here's my conclusion for you. A turning point, but for what? The world has changed. That much is certain. The killing of Ali Khamenei and the launch of Operation Roaring Lion represent one of the most dramatic single moments in international relations since the September 11 attacks and the wars that followed. A regional power that had defied American pressure for nearly 5 decades has been struck at its very heart. American military capabilities had been displayed for the world to see. Russia and China have been exposed as willingly or unable to protect their allies when the chips are really down. Iran's network of regional proxies, Hezbollah, the Houthis, and others are under pressure that they never had been faced before. And inside Iran itself, a population, a long silenced setting that is now changing. But the harder questions remain unanswered. What comes next in Iran? Who will govern it and how? Will this conflict stay limited or will it expand in unpredictable directions? Will higher oil prices and disrupted trade cause global economic slowdown that hurts ordinary people far from the battlefield? Will America's willingness to act outside the boundaries of the law, international law, inspires other powerful nations to do the same? And if so, against whom? The great historians Barbara Tuchman once wrote about how the great powers of 1914 stumbled into World War I, a conflict none of them fully wanted, and none of them could control it once it started. That is not to say the war will become something that catastrophic. It may not, but it is a reminder that when powerful nations make big moves, the consequences far from find in ways that no one fully predicts, and that is ordinary people, soldiers, civilians, workers, families who ultimately pay the price. We are living through a turning point in the geopolitical landscape in the world, whether it turns towards a more stable world or a more dangerous one depends on decisions being made right now in Washington, in Tehran, in Tel Aviv, in Moscow, in Beijing, in Riyadh, in Doha. The next weeks and months will tell us a great deal about what kind of world we are entering into and what kind of future is being built or destroyed in our name. If you like this video, make sure to leave me a comment below. And if you found this video helpful, please subscribe and hit the like button. And remember, geopolitics impacts your daily life in more ways than one. Till next time. Thank you.